Welcome, Dr. Tara.
Hi, thanks for
Hi.
having me.
Very excited to talk to you today about all things relationships. We'll probably get into divorce a little bit, sex, everything. But I would love to start by talking about your background a little bit. You were just telling me before we started recording a little bit, but I would love to hear, how that kind of shaped who you are and how you became interested in sex.
Yeah, it's a long story. Do we have time?
Yeah.
So I'm originally from Thailand. I grew up in Bangkok, and throughout my childhood from first grade to I finished middle school, so ninth grade, I went to an all-girls Catholic school. So that kind of set the stage of how I would come to understand, being a woman, you need to be a certain way. You need to be careful what you wear. You need to, because it can communicate to other people negatively. You don't want to be perceived as a bad woman or a slut. Like all of those internalized shame that I have experienced through being in an all-girls Catholic school have stayed with me until like mid-20s. So I have lived with all of that through and through. And, I grew up with very loving parents, but they were also very religious. So we would go to the temple like 3 times a week and pray and meditate. What I really love about being religious, because I still am, and people are really shocked because I'm very sexual, very open. I talk about sex on a daily basis for a living. But I also tell people I am religious. I pray every day. And they're always shocked. I always tell people like I'm grateful for the religious practices like meditation that I learned in Buddhism, because now I can like orgasm like no other, and I can
From meditation?
squirt. Yeah. And I can squirt because I practice meditation, and all of this started because of my religious family and going to Buddhist temples.
Okay. Tell us what is the connection between meditation and orgasming and squirting?
Yeah. So sexual meditation is extremely powerful, and there's a lot of studies on it. However, somehow it's never been popularized. And I kind of have a feeling I know why. Like if people find a practice like sexual meditation helping them in so many different ways for their sexual wellness, they might not be using pharmaceutical, for example, because there are studies that show sexual meditation can help with erectile dysfunction. But Viagra is $1 billion industry. So if people can solve their own dick problems, why would they, use Viagra, know? So sexual meditation focuses on sexual thoughts, feelings, and sensations in the body. So it works like a regular meditation, but it focuses on those things. And because you focus on those things, it translates into when you do have a sexual encounter with a sexual partner, you're able to stay focused on the sensations within the body. And that enhances coming. That enhances the process of orgasming and the ability to focus and push for squirting orgasms, for example.
So let's clear up this misconception maybe about squirting. I always thought that it was pee. No?
It's a mix of both.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a mix of both. And I think that the narrative of it is like, it's dirty. Urine itself is actually pretty sterile.
Yeah.
And it is a mix of other fluids as well. So I always tell people, like, when you are so into it, you're so into the partner, the sex is so fucking hot, and you just want to come and push it out, you won't care what fluids it is.
Sure.
Like it can be anything. It can be Mountain Dew, it can be poop. Like you don't know, you don't care because you're so into it. So maybe our concerns should be more towards how can we have that kind of sex?
Yeah.
Rather than what is in this fluid.
Yeah. I mean, I never really even thought of it as dirty, even if it was urine. I just feel like so many people are like, like they're trying to invalidate it, as like not really associated with coming or something. They're like, they're just peeing,
Yeah.
Where do the other fluids come from? What is it? Is it just like
the Skene's gland?
Oh.
And in a way, there's other types of fluids mixed with urine. So when people are like, it's just pee, I just say, well,
but it feels good.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
So how does one sexually meditate? What does that look like in practice?
Yeah. So for me, because when I started, I was already meditating. I was meditating since I was 5 years old. You know, when I was a kid, my parents sent me to like meditation camps and like silent camps. So I kind of have this internal skill of the ability to sit quietly and meditate. But when it comes to sexual meditation, I always wanted to help guide people through different types of sexual meditations, be it like sexual affirmations, sexual visualizations, physical sensations in the body. So I have guided sexual meditations on YouTube. Actually, that's completely free if people want to try. There's a 5-minute one, a 10-minute one, a solo one, a couples one that you can try. But you can do that and have me like guide you through these meditations. Or you can sit quietly and imagine a sexual encounter that is very orgasmic for you. And if you're familiar with visualization and that type of meditation, it should be pretty easy to kind of pinpoint one experience. And it can be through retrospection or sexual fantasy. So you can come up with it by yourself or just think about the past. And then sit and meditate quietly while thinking of those things and trying to feel it in your body, whether it's the chest area, the pubic area, and massaging them at the same time. Some people enjoy doing that quietly. This is how you can do it. Or if you want guided meditation, there are also resources on YouTube.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, so I want to rewind a little bit. So you were living in Thailand and you were in this religious family.
Yeah.
When did you know that you were interested in sex and how did you make it your career?
You know, I've always been kind of a horny little kid because in Thailand, when I was around like 11, if you've been to Thailand, you know, we have those handheld bidet. And I just remember I would always use the bidet extra on my clit. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it was sexual. It just felt good. So I've always been a sexually curious human. Now, through informed experiences in my life, like I went to high school in Finland, right? And experiencing that like Euro experience was so different. In Finland, people were very nonchalant about sexuality. Like it's not even a topic. Naked body, like nudity is very common because they all get naked and go into saunas together. The whole family. So like you can see your grandpa's balls and be normal. Like it would be normal, you know? So for them, they practice like body neutrality. It's not celebrating your body like, oh my God, every body type is so beautiful. You're gorgeous. You're a princess. You're a queen. Like it's not like that at all. It's just, it's a fucking body.
It's so
like,
normal.
It does things. And I kind of like that stoicism in like European culture, but well, particularly Scandinavian and like Finnish culture where I was. So that's how I was exposed to like nudity and like being comfortable with your body. And then I moved to America. And the first place I moved to was in LA. I studied in graduate school. I studied interpersonal communication, but particularly studying relationships. And through studying relationships, I learned that sex issue is one of the issues that everyone will go through in their lifetime. So it's an issue that every single human will experience. It's like pooping. You know, it's an issue that is so universal. So to me, in my head, I was like, wow, this is something that I wanted to be a part of, like finding a solution. So that was kind of the first time I was more curious about studying it more systematically. Then I went to Arizona. I lived there for 4 years for my PhD program. Throughout that, I studied long distance relationships, jealousy, attachment. And then once I graduated, I got my dream job as a professor at Cal State University Fullerton, so in Orange County. And at Cal State Fullerton, I teach sexual communication. And it's a 4-month-long course starting from very beginning, like sexual debut, which is like first time having sex, throughout like, you know, aging, like being an older person and having sex. So I teach like that kind of class. At the same time, I was experiencing a very kind of tumultuous relationship. And, you know, I hit rock bottom when I got a divorce. And I just remember living this life where I was teaching these concepts like healthy sexual communication, a healthy relationship, a passionate relationship is consisted of, and remember feeling like a fraud because I wasn't in a passionate relationship. I was in a sexless marriage, and we were great friends, but we didn't have sex. So it was really, really hard to preach about having amazing sex life when I didn't have an amazing sex life. So at that point, I remember I was sitting on the floor just crying. That was a couple weeks before I asked for the divorce. And I just realized like, I need to fucking change. I need to change for myself and my sanity and my mental health, because I can't keep teaching the stuff that I'm not doing. So yeah, then I asked for a divorce and I jumped on this sexual wellness journey for myself, and through experimenting with lots of methods, Western methods, Eastern methods about sexual wellness, I become more and more and more sexually empowered. And once I feel very unapologetic and confident about who I am sexually, I was able to attract, I would say he's the person of my dreams. And he's now my second husband. My friends and I joke like, well, is your second husband? I'm like, yes, hopefully last.
Yeah.
But yeah, now I feel like I'm a very, very different person from 6 years ago. And I credit all of that to me hitting rock bottom with my own sexuality and living in a passionless relationship and jumping on this sexual empowerment journey. So I would say it's a mix of academic journey and personal journey.
God, I have so many questions. I think the first one that I have is, what is at the root, if you can say, of people's sexual problems? I mean, you said everybody's going to experience it at some point in their lifetime. And I'm sure everybody listening can think of a time or a relationship or something where they were experiencing that. But what does it come down to? Is it communication, or does it kind of vary depending on the situation?
It comes down to 3 factors. The first factor is you and the things you're experiencing, your past experiences, your traumas. If you have, unresolved, let's say, sexual trauma or relationship trauma from the past, like all of those will manifest in your current relationship and therefore will be the cause of its demise. So you are the person that is responsible for your own mental health and sexual health and relationship health. So that's the first factor of like, you have to take an audit of like, is there something that's about me that is a holdup? If you feel like, I'm myself, I feel comfortable being in this relationship, I'm expressing, I know how to have an orgasm and experience pleasure, so it's not me, then it's between you and them. So it's an interpersonal problem. And that's the second factor. If it's an interpersonal problem, it means it's a communication problem. Is it because the way you communicate? Is it the way you deliver messages? Because for some people, they have good intentions, but they don't communicate well, right? For a very easy example is men asking, did you come? You mean, how was it?
Yeah.
Try how was it next time. Not, did you come? What was I going to say? What was I supposed to say? If I say no, then that will hurt your heart and your dick.
Yes.
And if I said yes, I'd be lying. So the interpersonal problems can be the second factor of problems. And the last type of problems is societal problems. Is it your culture? Is it your religion? Is it their culture, their religion? So that's more like societal issues and how you process those societal expectations and norms. So yeah, the 3 main factors of sex issues would be you, interpersonal problems, and societal problems.
It's so interesting because I feel like it's so uncomfortable to look at. You mentioned an audit. I mean, do you recommend somebody sit down and they go, okay, this is my trauma, this is how I'm feeling about things, and, look at your own stuff? Like I told you before, I'm sober. So that's something that we do regularly in sobriety is we take an inventory. They say like a business that doesn't take inventory can't be successful. You have to be aware of the stuff that you have, I guess. Yeah. And so we look at it emotionally. But is that what you recommend somebody do
100%.
With their sexual wellness? Okay.
Yeah, a sexual audit. Yeah. And that's what I do when, I work with clients or even my students at Cal State. Like if I teach a concept and they're like, oh my God, I feel like I have this problem. I say, okay, let's sit down. Like, let's list out some of the reasons why this occurs, right? So take an audit of the you part. What are some of the past experiences and the person that you are today that maybe is inhibiting you in having a great sex life? And then the interpersonal part, if you have a partner, what tends to be the issue between you and them? Is it the delivery? Is it not communicating? Is it walking on eggshells? And then the third factor would be societally, are you from a certain culture or religious background that has like a very strong belief about something, right? I work with LGBTQ people that, some of them can't get away from the idea of having gay sex is bad. It's like, I can't get my dick hard because I feel like it's wrong. And that's a religious belief issue in which it's a different kind of issue to find a method of healing from.
How do you work with people through issues like that? Because I feel like those kind of fundamental things are so hard to overcome. Or somebody with sexual trauma, or, I think that in this country, we just kind of have this like puritanical attitude where like, we think things like masturbation are like inherently bad. And, I remember having those beliefs and I don't even know where they came from because I didn't grow up in a religious family. It was just kind of absorbed, culturally.
Yeah.
So how do you...
Like the American culture, if you will.
Yeah.
Unless you grew up in like a very sexually positive
like
family.
Yes.
And like, maybe like San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think most people that I have encountered that have asked me questions have been surrounding shame.
Yes.
Not wanting to do something or not being able to experience things fully due to the blockage that's in your mind that you can't overcome. There is a method called restructuring beliefs, and it does take a while, but it does take, taking apart everything that you currently believe in or were taught to believe in, writing them down, talking about each bullet point and giving a different meaning to that sentence, and then now occupy that new sentence with this sense of pride, and then continue to do it daily, whether it be it through looking in the mirror and saying it, or journaling or meditating or whatever is your personal practice. But you have to do it in order to continue to occupy a new belief. And, as a sex coach, like the main issues that I experience, that I see from people, it's not necessarily these like deep rooted issues, because if they do have like deep rooted maybe psychological issues or abuse, I typically send them to like trauma therapists first, because trauma therapists are trauma informed and they have certain practices that will help you go through and either reliving it or getting rid of the sense of a victim from those traumas. I typically work with clients that have been healing through their traumas and want to set new sexual goals and want creative solutions to get to those goals.
Let's talk about some of those solutions. So,
yeah.
I mean, we were also talking before about how sexual wellness is such an important part of overall wellness. And I think when people hear wellness or they talk about wellness, they talk about nutrition and physical exercise and mental health and maybe spirituality and mindfulness. But we were talking before about like sexual mindfulness, which is something that's really important to you. How does sexual wellness fit into somebody's overall wellness?
In my opinion, and I'm biased, but in my opinion, I think sexual wellness is very much like the foundation of overall wellness. As you can see, when people are sexually frustrated, it affects their every part of life. I have had clients that are binge eating because his wife stopped having sex with him for the last 3 years, right? And he's now binge eating due to dissatisfaction and frustration, and he doesn't know what is a healthy outlet or how to communicate the dissatisfaction. So in my opinion, I think sexual wellness is very much one of the foundation, apart from, health is wealth. I think everyone knows that. When you have a good and healthy and regulated sex life, the kind of sex life that you desire, it positively affects other parts of your life. You can see people that are also like sexually frustrated or having sex issues in their relationship that it shows on their skin even.
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes they have skin problems and they go to dermatologists. I don't know why. Oh, but they never thought about perhaps because you have never had an orgasm with your current partner for the last 5 years. Right?
Yeah, you get that glow. I mean, it's like such a cliche, but it's true.
It is true.
I
It's
can
so
always
true.
tell my
You
friends.
do get that glow. That's why I highly whenever I talk to people about life issues, I'm prescribing them masturbation.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe you should
Skincare
masturbate. Yeah.
But it does do something to you hormonally, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. When you feel, you know, like down and maybe a little bit like you need a little that extra umph in your life, I always go, have you tried masturbation? Because when you masturbate, there's an orgasm, there's, you know, feel good hormones that are released like oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin. So it is a good practice. You know, it's like going to the gym, coming back, masturbate. Like that's my whole routine. That's what I did this morning.
I love it. Love the honesty. Well, I think so many people still have shame around it. Like we were talking about before. You were kind of saying, you know, there's these three parts. There's the beliefs, there's you, and there's the other person. So do you recommend people start like working on themselves and learning their bodies and masturbating and getting comfortable with that before looking at the other person if they're in a relationship? Or how do you recommend somebody go about that?
I would recommend doing them concurrently. You know, that sentence, I've been seeing it a lot, like you gotta love you before you love someone else. And there's a lot of therapists nowadays saying like, no, you can do both.
Yeah.
You can, you know, have self-improvement while being in a relationship and improving that relationship at the same time. Like you can do both. Humans are complex, are intelligent, and are very capable. So if we choose to live a sexually fulfilling life, we can do both. We can make ourselves feel more comfortable through different practices like sexual meditation, journaling, reading more sexuality books, and masturbating and feeling more comfortable with our own bodies, as well as learning to positively communicate about sex with your partner. You can do both. But you know, when people talk about sexual shame and what are some of the self-help practices that you can do that is going to be that's going to have like realistic results, I always say people feel uncertain when they don't have enough information. So the very first step is to gain enough information about that topic, and that needs to be through education. So like through reading, through listening to podcasts, through finding, you know, articles and kind of making sure that you have all the information you need in order to move forward. So if it is like a lot of shame from, let's say, religion or purity culture, maybe read through it. Read through the history of purity culture, why we all come to believe the Madonna whore complex. Why is the society shaming women for body count? Why, you know, that all of these things. I think educating yourself and having information will reduce your uncertainty and increase your confidence.
Let's talk about the communication aspect of it. Whenever I've done an episode, I've done a few on, you know, sexual health and intimacy, relationships. People always ask the same questions. And it's like, how do I keep the spark alive? How do I talk to my partner about sex? We have different sex drives. How do I navigate this? Like those kind of things. So how do you coach couples through that?
Yeah. I always say there's always going to be prerequisites. You know, you can't advise a couple, like let's say if a couple has been sexually disconnected for over a year, you can't just be like, oh, buy lingerie, try this position, throw in a vibrator. Like none of these things will work because we're missing the prerequisites. And that's the desire to try. Are you even in a relationship where two people have the desire to try? You know? I mean, I got a divorce before. I know we weren't anymore at a place of trying because we have been trying. So are you even in a relationship where there's desires to try from both people? And that's a prerequisite.
It's so true.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Whenever I hear the answer of like, have you tried toys? Have you tried traveling? I'm like, doesn't matter.
Yes.
Do you have the desire to change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so overlooked. I mean, I'm just laughing because of my own
because you're like,
experience.
Girl, it's true.
Yeah. Well, and I think like people recommend that, and there's like a physical, like if that is gone, if the passion's gone, if that desire to try is gone, and someone's telling you to like introduce toys and go take a trip, you're like, hell, fuck, no.
No, exactly.
Like you don't,
So exactly. No amount of lingerie will fix the lack of desire to try.
Yeah.
Because you're out, you're checked out.
Yeah.
Have you heard of quiet divorce?
No.
Or like quiet leaving?
No. What's that?
It's a psychological idea of how people will actually quit the relationship about 6 months prior to breaking up with someone.
Interesting.
Quiet quitting.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So if you do...
I'm doing the math in my head.
Yeah. I know for sure that theory holds true for me because, I was thinking about it. I wasn't ready to enact it.
Yeah.
I was thinking about it.
Yeah. So many people have been asking me, like, how do you know when it's time to leave? And I can relate to that for sure. I think when you keep thinking about it, because I was thinking about it. I mean, we separated 2 years ago. So we were both thinking about it, obviously, but then we got back together and I'm sure we were both thinking about it again. But yeah, that happens long before the actual divorce happens.
It's the quiet quitting period.
Yeah. And it's awful.
It's awful. And it feels like you're walking on eggshells.
Yes. And the inner turmoil that you experience. And that's another thing we were talking about before, like that being in limbo, like where mentally you're out, but physically you're there. I found for myself, like the bigger that gap was, the more turmoil I had inside. So.
Yeah. And that's natural.
Yeah.
The more you go through this experience, the more the buildup is. It's like pouring water in a cup and you just pour it daily. And at one point you're just overflow and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna just,
quiet quitting.
Yeah, quiet quitting. And so, whenever I get that kind of question, I always ask, let's reflect first. Do we have the desire to try? Because when we do, then we can talk about the other steps. When it comes to communication and for couples that have never ever talked about sex, I want to first teach people of the different communication concepts within the realm of sexuality. If you're in a relationship, you should be doing two things: micro-sexual communication and macro-sexual communication. Microsexual communication is the communication that occurs during sex. And that is giving instructions, giving affirmations, giving compliments, communicating likes and dislikes. And these are the things that need to be happening in order for you to have a great sex life in the long run. If you're thinking about it right now while you're listening, like, oh no, I have never done it before, it's not too late to start trying. But at the same time, also know, realistically speaking, you will never have a great sex life in like 20, 30 years unless you're communicating during sex. And one concept that's kind of fun that people always ask me to share more about is the concept of dirty talk. Because there's a whole realm of research on dirty talk. And people always wonder, like, how do you implement that in, during sex? Like, do I just say it? And I always say, well, ask your partner first. Like, hey, have you heard of dirty talk? What do you think about it? Or maybe send them this podcast, right? Send them a clip. And so it starts a conversation about dirty talk. And maybe that is a way to spice up your sex life, is trying new things that are free. Like you don't need to buy anything to try dirty talk. And there are different categories of dirty talk. There's compliments, right? You can say, your pussy smells so good. You can say, your cock tastes so good when you give a blowjob. Like that's always an enhancement, and kind of a surprise for your partner if you've never done it before. But I'm sure it's a good surprise. Yeah. You can ask questions, and this is a good way to initiate dirty talk from the other person. You can narrate what's going on. You can give the other person like a demand or being like dominating, but you can also submit and be like a submissive person in the moment, like saying submissive things that are politically incorrect but works in sex. Like, you know, like I'm your dirty slut. Like there's nowhere else you can say this, you know? Don't say it at DMV. Only sex you can say these things. And that's why dirty talk is so special, because it really shows the closeness within that relationship.
Yeah.
So that's micro sexual communication that can spice up your sex life.
I have a question though. Why is it so effective? Because it is so effective, but like mentally and physiologically, like why does that enhance it so much?
Yeah. So sex, because like you said before, in this purity culture, sex is taboo, right? So when we're doing something taboo with another person, we're creating a shared experience. And when you engage in things that are perceived as dirty, taboo, politically incorrect together, it enhances the experience and making this co-created experience even more of a bonding activity. When someone feels close enough to be themselves or to share something like dirty talk that's very taboo, it communicates to the other person that we're in a healthy relationship, that I'm able to express myself authentically. It's because we're in a healthy relationship. And I think that in itself is an affirmation. That, oh, like we're good. We're doing this. Like we're good. And that is micro sexual communication. Couples need to 100% also do macro sexual communication, or what I call like sexy check-ins. If you've never done it before, today is the day to start. And it can be as simple as asking, and I do this with my husband. I actually recently did it on stage with my husband in order to show people what it's like in real life. But it's asking your partner monthly, like a monthly check-in. What did you think about our sex life last month? And how would you rate it from 1 to 10? You know, and recently we did this last weekend, and, you know, I told my husband, I think it was an 8 out of 10 because I feel like you were quite busy and we didn't have those like long sexual sessions. Although we did have a lot of exploration because we were going to like sex parties and, you know, having fun exploring.
I want to talk about that after.
Sure.
Bookmark that. Okay.
So we were doing that. So I had the exploration part, like that part is doing good. But the part where it's you and me and like maybe a undistracted amount of time having sex and exploring together, like we didn't have enough of that. So I was rating it at 8. And I said all of this on stage and with him on it. And so I wanted to show people like, you know, I'm not a 10 out of 10 all the time, even though I'm a sexuality expert. And I'm
what did
able
he
to
rate
have
it?
He said 9 because his exploration was really exciting, and he felt like he was able to connect with me on a different level that's outside of the norm.
Got it.
Both of us have rated it like 6 before. You know, there was a time where it was very difficult physically because I was sick or if he was sick, and we just kind of talk through it. So when you ask that question, the probing question or the second question would be, what is the one thing you can do, I can do, and we can do in order to improve that score by 1 point? I'm a small goal kind of girl and like slowly, gradually achieving. So I always ask people to try asking like, what is the one thing we can do together that will improve that by 1 point? We're not trying to go 10 out of 10. We're just trying to go from 6 to 7.
Right. That makes it so much more manageable.
So
like
much
less
more
daunting.
manageable.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a porn star sex life. Like no one is expecting that. But how can we both feel a little bit more sexually satisfied next month? And then the last question I ask is, what is one positive sexual memory you have of us last month? And it allows for two people to reflect and relive a positive sexual moment together, and therefore reinforcing positive sexual experiences for the next month. So that's the macro sexual communication that all couples need to be doing.
Okay, I want to talk about sex parties.
Let's do it.
I got an invite to Sanctum. I would just like to put that out there because I talked about it on like Dumois' podcast 2 years ago when I was separated. Never went because I got back together and husband was not down. Ex-husband was not down. But I'd like to revisit that.
He was not down.
Yeah.
Because usually the husbands are down.
Yeah. I think like he's so private and I don't know, maybe it was like an age thing.
That sounds like personal insecurity.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to like air him out on the podcast.
Right.
But yeah, I think maybe just being in a completely different
Right.
place, different generation. Like, I don't know.
And sometimes it's not someone's flavor. Like, you
Yeah.
know, I talk about it with my clients. Some of my clients are, oh, I would absolutely never go to something like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Have you been to Sanctum?
I've not been to Sanctum.
Which have
but
you
I've-
been to? Or if you're allowed to
many.
say.
Yeah, I've been to many.
Like a secret society.
I've been to, I would say, over 10.
Oh.
But the more mainstream ones that have like websites and marketing are probably
Kinky Rabbit.
Kinky Rabbit.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I went to that one recently.
How was that?
Ministry of Desire.
Mm-hmm.
Kinky Rabbit was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was private. When you arrive, you lock your phones outside, which I really appreciate because
Yeah.
we also went to this other party recently that everyone had their phones.
Oh God.
And I'm like, okay, I'm not about to get naked where everyone have their phones with them. You know,
No,
even
that's
though it
crazy.
is like courteous to not bring out your phone, but I still see some people were taking, you know, selfies or photos with their friends. I'm like, I don't want to be naked and be in that photo.
Yeah. Are you naked the whole time, or like you in lingerie? Like, what happens when you go to one of these parties?
Depends
Walk
on the
us through.
party. But
Okay.
let's say using Kinky Rabbit as an example, which
Mhm.
is a more like higher end sex party, is more organized.
Mhm.
There's like actors and actresses. Those you arrive like in your coat
Mhm.
and then you take it off and you're in lingerie.
Okay.
So women are in lingerie, men are typically slightly more dressed. And then towards like about midnight, most people are naked.
Midnight. That's late. You gotta have an earlier.
Yeah, I know, right?
earlier sex party.
I know. My husband and I always like, okay, we got to drink coffee. It's
Yeah.
9 p.m. It doesn't even start yet. It started at 10.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's
I'm
like
out.
10 to 4.
Oh my God. No.
And the first like hour or two, people are still dressed. Like
Uh-huh.
women are in lingerie, except for like a few people are already naked, like
Mhm.
someone already on their knees, you know, has
Mhm.
someone already fucking in the bathroom.
Mhm.
Like that's kind of an outlier. Most people are dressed, and then towards midnight, like 90% of the people are naked
Mhm.
and having sex.
Yeah. So tell us what happens. Like, are you having sex with your husband and other people, or is he off having sex with other people and you're with other? Like, how does that work, or is it just dependent on who the person is? Like, well,
Depends on the relationship.
Okay.
But we're in a monogamish relationship. So
Uh-huh.
we're like 95% monogamous,
Got it.
5% exploring.
Mhm.
So we're more flexible in terms of experiencing sexual stuff with other people,
Mhm.
but we're also not completely open. So we're not like dating other people
like
or
outside, you're doing
seeing
it
other
together.
It's just us. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Is doing it together, going to sex parties together, experiencing things together. So if someone was to, okay, like give my partner a blowjob, like I have to say okay
Mhm.
about it and I have to be able to like watch it.
Mhm.
And not gonna lie, it's like kind of a turn on for me. And
Sounds like a turn on to me.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Most
Yeah.
of my girlfriends are like, oh, that's hot.
Yeah.
But there are also some women that are like, oh, I would never share my husband with anyone, which
Really?
is fine. That's
Yeah.
your boundary. But
Yeah.
like, I think it's hot.
Yeah, I do too.
So that's something that we are able to experience.
Mhm.
And also like having sex in front of other people is something we enjoy.
Mhm.
We're a little bit of an exhibitionist.
Mhm.
So at this party, he was like fingering me and like there was like 8 to 10 people watching and I
Mhm.
like squirted on
Wow.
his face.
Amazing.
And this lady clapped.
Like golf clap.
She's a girl's girl. Yeah. Like she was clapping when I squirted. I was like, oh, thank you. And then
Amazing.
later on during that night around 2 a.m. I ran into her again in an orgy room and she pulled me aside and she said, that was beautiful. And I said,
Aw.
thank you so much.
She is a girl's girl.
She is a girl's girl. She was the only one clapping.
That's so funny.
It
Oh my
was so
gosh.
much fun. That party was a lot of fun. So
Mhm.
shout out to Kinky Rabbit. They do organize a very nice private party
Mhm.
where it's, you know, all phones are locked outside. So it feels very safe.
Mhm.
And the people there are very like, they seem like they know what's going on. And
Right.
No one, especially guys, like no one is like initiating and touching
Mhm.
without consent.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Interesting. Do people ever just go there to watch and they don't participate?
A lot of people, actually. I would say almost 50%
Wow.
that I see in a room.
How many people are there?
It won't be super accurate, but at least 100.
Okay.
Yeah. Like maybe between 100 to 150.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's also people going in and out.
Mm-hmm.
There's also so many rooms. So there are rooms that is like you have to pay a certain price to go in.
Oh.
And I didn't go into that room, so I have no
Uh-huh.
idea how many people are in that room. Yeah.
What happens in that room?
Probably more performances.
Okay, got it.
Because I have been to other sex parties where it's couples going just to be together, but there's a sex show in the middle. So there's like a gangbang in the middle and you just watch and you just do stuff with your partner. So I've seen those too.
I know there's one of those in Paris.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're everywhere, but
they
I
are
remember hearing
everywhere,
about
but it's so
one
much
like
fun
that.
too.
Yeah.
It allows you to connect sexually with your partner in a way that is outside the norm, and it creates this stronger bond. Like we're doing something taboo together.
Yeah.
You know, we're hiding together.
Yeah.
But
Well, and
not
I would
really
imagine
hiding.
that helps to keep the spark alive too.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure that, the issues that so many people run into with sex is that they're not exploring at all.
No.
And, when you're with somebody for like multiple years and longer, like it gets dry.
Exactly.
Pun intended.
I can't imagine like just missionary sex with one partner like 40 years.
Forever. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I will love my partner. My husband's my soulmate. Like, I know he's my soulmate because I've dated like so many people and I just know this is different. But again, like we are on the same wavelength. And I think finding a person who is on the same wavelength as you is a blessing and is something that I think everyone's looking for, is that you share similar values, and we share similar values in terms of sexual exploration. We think it's important. We think it's a flavor of life, right? With my ex, it was like, oh no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, it was really hard, especially being someone in a sex expert.
Yeah.
Like, in the sexuality field, like, yes, you can be, monogamous and traditional and still be a sex coach or a sex therapist, but that's your route. But my route is all about the ability to share real experiences of taboo sex. And so for me, it's like important that I go to sex parties.
Yeah.
And it was hard for my ex to even accept what I do professionally, let alone like in personal life. So I just knew we weren't in the same wavelength. And with my current husband, like we have such deep respect and understanding of what I do. Like he loves what I do. And he loves that I'm willing to explore sexually, even though, I know way more about this world than he did when we started dating. But the thing was the desire to try. He was always like, "Ooh, that's interesting." I wasn't ready yet. Like he said like I wasn't ready yet at the time. So we didn't start the relationship with going to sex parties. We started the relationship monogamous. And it was just us for over a year before we even try going to sex parties and enjoying sexual activities with others. So now we're transitioning into monogamish, and it's a very sweet spot that I love because we're able to pick and choose like how many times a year we explore. Maybe I get pregnant and maybe we won't explore for a year. And maybe when our kids are a little bit older, we explore again. And maybe we go to sex resorts. Like I always want to go to those with my husband. I feel like it'd be so much fun. Like Jamaica.
Yeah. Hedonism.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that in my current relationship, that is always available when we communicate that we want to try.
Yeah, and it sounds like you guys have a strong foundation. Like you built that foundation before you started kind of doing this exploratory stuff. And it seems like maybe other people get into trouble where they don't have that foundation and they just start doing all these things, or they decide they want to be open, and then it's like
it
gets
mess.
Messy. Yeah.
It's a mess. It's really hard to be completely open or poly.
Yeah.
It's a lot to manage.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast recently. I can't remember which one, but they were saying like, I think people have this idealized version of it in their head, but then they're like, no, but then you're not just dealing with one other person and their feelings and you're dealing with 2 people or more
Yeah.
and managing all of that. So like you thought your relationship was a lot. Like suddenly you have all these other people in the mix.
Exactly.
And that's a lot of dynamics to have to navigate and juggle.
Yeah. One of my good friends is married and her marriage has one-sided poly. So she's bi. So she's able to date other women, but he has no desire. So he is monogamous with her, but she's able to date other women and have sex with other women. So it's interesting how people set up their relationship, you know, like especially being in LA, there's all kinds of relationship types. I've recently met like a couple at the sex party, another sex party that we just went to. And they're a little bit older. They're in their 40s. And the wife had a leash on this guy. And so I'm like, oh, is this your partner? And she's like, one of them. And she has 4 men in her life.
Wow.
And and this is, I feel, is becoming a little bit more visible because I also met this other sex coach and she's in her 60s. Her name's Suzanne Bratton. And she has like a husband and she has like a couple of other boyfriends. And her life is it's just her life. Like,
Good
you know,
for
she
her.
has a lot of sex
and
boyfriends. And it's just so interesting that, you know, we're able to share these things because of where we live. And I never take it for granted.
Yeah.
I know that I'm very privileged. I live in a big city. People are open-minded. And there are still lots and lots of people that even if, you know, they can't even get a divorce, for example. Like divorce is illegal. So we are privileged for sure.
I feel like the whole landscape is changing too. Like just there are so many more, like you were saying, structures of relationships. And I think younger generations are so much more open and fluid and, you know, lifespan is increasing. And it's like you're not getting married at like 21 and having a bunch of babies and then, you know, dying at 70. Like you're living to over 100. You're not with one person your whole life either. I think that it's so healthy, you know, to explore in that way.
Yeah. Talking about younger generation, like, you know, that's the generation I teach at the college. And Gen Zs are very interesting because there's two very different groups. There's a group of Gen Z that's like, I'm fluid and I'm down to explore everything. I don't need a label. Labels are limiting. And then there's a group of Gen Z that's like hardcore, like I want to get married and become a trad wife. Just can't wait to become a housewife and
stay at home. What is it on TikTok? Stay at home girlfriend.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be a stay at home girlfriend.
Yeah, there's a whole thing. So it's interesting. Yeah. Everything is changing and I'm down for whatever as long as like people are tolerant and accepting and kind.
Yeah.
You know, like you're able to do whatever you want as long as we can be kind and tolerant towards other people that live differently from us.
Amazing. Well, I would love to keep talking. Maybe we'll do a part 2 at some point. But thank you so much for coming on and tell everybody where they can find you. You have such a great podcast and so much good information on your TikTok and your Instagram and everything.
Thank you. Well, my podcast is called Luvbites by Dr. Tara, and it's a sexual exploration podcast. Every episode is different sex topics. And then my website is luvbites.co. That's LUVBITS.co, same as my Instagram and TikTok.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.